So I'm out here feeding the animals, and I don't know if you can hear what's going on over there, but ever since we had that fire, everyone's going crazy trying to cut down all the trees and everything. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, they're trying to clear out all the brush, especially if you look up here, it's so thick, and what everyone's trying to do is clear out all the smaller trees and just leave the big ones so you can easily fight a fire. Well, I just thought it was kind of interesting after one fire that's pretty close that everyone's kind of panicking. So today I thought I'd go through my collection of snakes, which is, I don't know, if you saw the feeding video, that was probably half my snakes. And on this one I'd kind of like to walk you through the whole collection. So let's check that out. Alright guys, so I put my snake boots on, and I have my snake hook, and I am going to show you some snakes. So I'm going to walk you, basically, first I'm going to start and kind of give you a tour of what I call the Reptile Room. And this is basically, you can almost not even capture it on film. So I got this part over here. Well, we'll just do kind of a surround all the way around. So I got my little workbench there, got my table in the middle, and then over here on this side, these are basically all my rodents on this side. So in here I have some big, huge, these are my breeders. I have 1 male, 4 females. And then, let's see, I have some of my babies in here. So those are Norway rats, just regular Norway rats. And then, let's see, in this tub over here are my mice. So I just use I found these white mice to be highly productive. They have like 16 babies at a time, it's incredible. And then I've just a couple tubs of African soft furs. And so people ask me, well, what do you use all the rodents for? I've had a couple questions like that. And the rodents over here are to feed all the snakes over here. So basically what I have, this is an ARS 5030 stack up on top. And here I keep my males and some of my grow-outs. And I actually have some open slots that I'm planning on keeping some holdbacks. But everything with the label has snakes in it. So some of them are kind of higher end snakes that I bought last year that I'm growing out. And then on the bottom I have a couple boa tubs. Over here I have a hatchling rack that's currently empty. And then over here, on the top up here, I keep my breeder female ball pythons. I have another boa tub, and then some ARS 8018 tubs. And I actually planned on breeding some Wilma pythons, but I decided to put big female ball pythons in there instead. So I'm just going to kind of start at the beginning and go around the room and just kind of pull tubs to start. So the first tub I'm pulling right here, I can show you this girl. Oh, if I can get her down. She is one of my oldest snakes. So she's an Arizona mountain king snake. And I bought her when supposedly she was like 6 years old. I've had her for a few years. Apparently they only live like 10 years, and I'm guessing she's older than 10. And at this point she's got some pretty bad arthritis in her, so you can kind of tell how she kind of curls up in the way she kind of moves around. She doesn't move around real good. She's gotten a little better with since I've actually fed her quite a bit, and she's kind of a picky eater. But I'm basically just going to keep her until the end of her life. She's pretty much at the end. She's a really cool snake, but see how she kind of curls up like that? It's kind of weird. I've never seen a snake do that. And I think it's definitely because she's just really, really old and just kind of arthritic. So I just thought that was one of my more interesting ones. So this is a banana phase California king snake, and she is, you can see, she's always kind of in feeding mode. She'll eat anything. You throw your shoe in there and she'll eat it. But you can snap her out of it if you just kind of grab her easily, just for a second. And she was actually raised by kids, so she is super, super friendly and really curious. She's a really beautiful snake. And actually, when I started getting into snakes at the very beginning, I was thinking of breeding king snakes, and I decided I'd rather breed ball pythons instead. So basically all my king snakes now I only have a few, and they're just pets. So she's just a really cool snake. I don't know if I'll ever breed her, but she's fun to have in my collection, especially when kids come over and they want a snake to play with. I always pull this one out first. She's just a really wonderful pet. So this one is actually a desert phase California king snake. And when I first got them, I got them when they were teeny tiny little babies. They were super, super skinnier than a pencil. And they were super aggressive when they were smaller, but I've handled this one quite a bit, and he's calmed down quite a bit. And I haven't really probed this guy to sex him to see if it's a male or a female. But I do have a funny story about this one. So when I first bought him, I was putting him in these ARS 70-30 tubs, and I put him in a tub that had a little crack right there, and I actually had two of them. This guy's going all over. And one of them got out, and I thought, I must have left it open or something. So I put him back in the tub, and sure enough, he got out again. And this time, he got out for good, and he got lost in the house, and we never found him. It's been a couple of years, and you know, all my neighbors say, oh yeah, the neighbor, you know, the first story they tell is, yeah, they had a snake that got loose in the house and they never found it. So nobody wants to come over because they think I have a loose snake in the house. But the snake was like almost probably as skinny as this at the end of its tail right there. And it was smaller than a pencil. And I doubt it survived, and if it did, I'm sure it's not even this big. So this one is an Arizona mountain king snake. And he's really cool. I actually got a deal on 3 of them. So that older female I showed you first, she's part of the package deal. And I don't know. I was thinking about breeding them at first, but I just decided to keep them as pets instead. And he's just got some of the most beautiful coloring of any snake. This contrast is amazing. So he's basically just another pet that, you know, if I have kids over, I let them handle this one too. I mean, this one is so small, especially for the kids that are real scared of snakes. His mouth is so small that even if he bit you, he couldn't even break the skin. So it's just another cool snake. So now I'm kind of getting into some of my more... Oh, wow! Woo! That was close. You almost got me on that one. I just cleaned the tub, and she just peed all over and almost bit me. I think I'm going to clean her tub. Hold on a second. Alright, so I noticed on... if you watch my last videos, I started using these little moss balls for humidity. And the problem is if they pee on them, I just throw them away because they smell so bad. Anyway, let's go back to this guy. Whew. In a clean tub. That guy's just crazy. I want to move him down here. I guess there's a little better light. So, this is probably one of my first investment quality snakes, I guess you would say. So this is actually a Pastel Desert Ghost female. Pastel Spider Desert Ghost. So it has the pastel gene, which makes her yellow. And then it has the spider gene, which kind of breaks up the pattern and gives it these cool little lines. And then, on top of all that, it has the Desert Ghost gene. And the Desert Ghost is a recessive mutation, which is really cool. It's kind of one of the latest crazes in ball pythons. It just makes the colors pop and lightens them and intensifies them. And I've never seen any snake as bright and clean as the Desert Ghosts. And I'm really fortunate to get into this project. and she is eating like crazy. As you can tell, she just popped out and almost bit me. So, which is good because that means she's a really good eater, which means she can put weight on pretty fast, and which brings her to breeding size faster than some. Well, I just think I think she's hands down probably my most beautiful snake in the whole collection as far as ball pythons. And the other thing I find interesting in this particular one is there's kind of I guess you call it a flaw in some of the genes. And with the spider gene, they usually have what they call a head wobble or a stargaze. And as you can tell in this girl, you almost can't even tell she's a spider because her head wobble is almost not even there. And the other cool thing is if they have the pastel gene, they have green eyes. I don't know if you can see that, but she's got some really bright green eyes that are really neat. I can't get too close on my zoom. Kind of blurs out. And that head stamp, she's got really cool pattern on her head. She's just a really awesome snake. Okay, so this one is called a coral glow. It's just a single gene animal, and he's one of my males. He's one of my more interesting snakes, I would say. So a coral glow is the same as the banana gene. They just come from two different locations. Basically, two different people discovered them almost at the same time, and one named them coral glow and another named them banana, and they found out they're basically the same. So the coral glow, when I say coral glow, it just comes from that line of the same snake, really. And there's some snakes that look kind of similar. There's the ultramel and caramel albino, but both of those are recessive. And this guy is codominant. So if you bred it to a normal, half the babies will come out as coral glows. And he's also 100% het pied, so I originally wanted to cross him with my pied and get some coral glow pieds, but I only have one pied female. So that project's going to have to wait till maybe next year. And another cool thing about coral glows is they have these little freckles all over. I don't know if you can see these like tiny little black spots. And that's just part of the pattern mutation on this particular snake. And sometimes it seems like as the older they get, the more freckles they have, and some have more freckles than others. Some hardly have any. And if you mix them with the right genes, all the freckles go away. So it depends on what other genes you have in the mix. And the other cool thing about this snake, it's the only ball python that links the male and the female with the gene. So he's a male, and I'm not sure exactly if they call it a male maker or a female maker. So if the original breeding came from a female, and this is a male, then his offspring would produce mostly females. But if someone produced them by crossing a male to something else, all the male babies would be male makers and produce mostly male offspring. It gets a little confusing. So basically, if I took this male and I crossed him with a normal, all the males from that clutch would be male makers. Okay, this is one of my breeder females. I bought her last year, and she's not really that old, maybe less than a year old, so she's got some pretty good weight to her. So this one is actually a clown ball python. Let's see if I can get her up. It's a clown mixed with the lesser gene. And clowns are kind of one of the hot things right now. The cool thing about clowns is that when you mix stuff with them, it's really unexpected, and you get these really vibrant patterns and really wild head stamps. And clown by itself I don't think is that impressive. And when I first started getting into ball pythons, everyone was crazy about clowns, and I thought, pieds look much better, why not get into pieds? And then it was a couple of years later that I realized, hey, people are into clowns not because of the base mutation, it's because when you start mixing different genes with the clown, you get some really impressive looking snakes. So it's kind of one of the hot projects. I still probably have another 2 years before she's big enough to breed, so at this point it's kind of a waiting game. But she is a really neat snake. So this is another desert ghost, similar to my female, but it doesn't have the spider gene in it. And I thought it was interesting that even without the spider gene, that the pattern is really reduced on this. It almost looks like Enchi, because the Enchi gene reduces pattern, but it doesn't have any Enchi in it. And you can pretty much tell in these guys that it has Pastel, because it has a faded head in the top, and the eyes are green. But he's another really cool looking snake, and I'm going to cross him with the other desert ghost, but I still have a couple years to go before I can breed these guys too. So I've had this girl for a while. This is Pinstripe Pine, and she's really one of my really neat snakes. She's just really beautiful. You add the pinstripe to the pied. The pied's recessive, the pinstripe is a dominant gene. And you get almost a, I almost call it like a golden pied. It has a really pretty golden color to it that's really, it's really impressive just by itself, I think. So, and I've had her for maybe a year and a half, so I was hoping she's going to be ready by this fall, which is in like 6 months, but I don't think I'm going to push it. I think I'm going to wait 1 more year to breed her. Okay, I have to tell you about this girl. She is, she kind of has a story behind her. So, she's a really pretty snake. She's actually a spider, has the spider gene, so that's basically what the base spider looks like. And she also has Pastel, which I guess it kind of breaks up the spider a little bit, but the Pastel really makes a really intense yellow. And there's different lines of Pastel. I think this is one of the brighter ones that I've seen. And I actually crossed her with a male, and I crossed her with a fire pied, and I'm hoping to see. She's possible het pied, so she might have some pied babies, and she's also possible yellow belly, which is really hard to tell unless you kind of cross it with the right genes. But when I first got this one, she was super aggressive, super aggressive. She would snap at me from across the room so hard she'd flip herself upside down. It was incredible. And she's still a little defensive. She's never really been friendly, but even an unfriendly ball python isn't. I mean, you can keep away from them to where they're not really that much of a danger. I mean, if I kept walking around out here and going back and forth, she'd eventually snap at me just by looking at me. I don't know, she's always been one of my meanest snakes, but she's still beautiful. So if you're wondering what a clown base mutation looks like, this is it here. This is just, whew, she's like in feeding mode right now. Let's get her out of it. So she's just a regular clown female, and I kind of wanted to pick up some straight recessive single gene clown females, just kind of to get my clown project moving along. And I still probably have a couple more years before I can breed her, but I'm hoping to kind of get some more multi-gene males for the clowns further down the road, and see what she can crank out. But it's just a recessive mutation. It's, you know, the clowns and the pieds are probably the hottest on the market right now if you're thinking about getting into something that's really high in demand. So this is my bamboo male, and he's one of the most striking ball python morphs I think that I've seen. When they first came out, they were really in high demand. They were really expensive, and then it kind of flopped, I think. So the problem with the bamboo is, I mean, as a standalone morph, it's one of the prettiest single gene animals that I've ever seen. The problem is if you mix it with other genes, it doesn't mix well. And it almost looks like no matter what you mix it with, it's just kind of like a faded out bamboo, and you can cross them with lessers, and you get the blue-eyed leucistics, which is like a white snake with blue eyes, which is probably one of the coolest combos that you can put with them. The other one I've seen that's really cool is the Albino Bamboo, or no, Ultramel Bamboo. That thing is just screaming. It's unbelievable. It's something you wouldn't expect. So for me, I'd rather breed like a bamboo to a normal and get more bamboos because I think the base mutation just as itself would be really popular. Okay, I picked up this scaleless head male last year, and basically it just looks like a normal ball python. I mean, it looks completely normal. The only difference is that it has a few scales missing on the top of his head. And actually, Brian Barczyk from BHB was the first one to import him from Africa, and he bred it to a normal ball python, and 50% of the babies came out with scales missing from their head. And then he bred a scaleless head to a scaleless head and came out with the first totally scaleless ball pythons. And it was pretty incredible. I mean, that kind of reset the whole ball python market industry. And now if you go to like NARBC and look at some of the high-end tables, I mean, everything there is the scaleless head gene mixed in. And when I first got into ball pythons, these were selling for like $45,000 a piece. And as a matter of fact, I think Brian Barczyk was offered $150,000 for that first totally scaleless ball python. So, I mean, it's so popular now. I mean, the price has really come down, and I think it's because so many people are into the project, and so many people have been breeding them. And I think it's probably one of the projects that have come down in price the fastest of any project that I've ever seen. And I think it's just because it's so awesome and everybody wants to get into it. It's kind of like the cutting edge morph, because you can now you can do everything in scaleless. You know, scaleless pieds, scaleless lessers, and it just kind of resets the base template for all these other morphs. So I'm really excited to get into this project. So this guy is a big spider pied male. So he's got the pied gene, and he also has the spider gene. So what happens when you mix the spider with the pied gene? It's weird. The spider interacts with it to push all the color just to the head. So every time you get a spider pied, it has just color on the head with an all-white snake. And the interesting thing about this guy is it has a really obvious spider wobble. I should call it stargazing. See if I can do this. But yeah. So if you kind of tilt him, he doesn't put his head up right. Most ball pythons will kind of correct their head, and sometimes you get him at an odd angle, like right there. He kind of just puts his head at a weird angle, and sometimes it bothers some people that the spiders kind of have that weird kind of a stargazing look. But I found it doesn't really hurt the animal. It's just a little different. It just adds a little personality, and it doesn't affect his ability to feed, really. He feeds just as well. So, another thing about this guy is when I bought him, the guy was selling him real cheap on Morph Market, and he was selling him like half price. And after I bought him, the price kind of plummeted because just because of that one sale, I think. And so if you're selling stuff at a discount, you really have to be careful because you can, you know, if you, especially if you're posting it in the wrong place, you can really tank the market really fast. Here's another really interesting snake, another ball python. So she is pied mixed with a lesser pied. And what's interesting about this girl, I haven't had her that long, so I'm trying to grow her out so I can breed her. So I actually tried to breed her this year, which I think was a mistake because she's definitely too small. And the only thing that it really did, she's not going to lay eggs. I don't think she'll lay eggs that small. And the only thing it really did is to put her off feed, which really kind of stunted her growth. So not like I'm way behind on this girl. I should have never paired her up. But it was my first year breeding, and I kind of tried a bunch of different things, and this is one of the things I tried, and kind of regret pairing her up. I probably shouldn't have. So another cool thing about this is kind of, we're talking about the spider and the head wobble. When you have lesser and pied together, what happens with these is you get eyes that are a little bit smaller than a regular ball python. So I don't know if you can recognize or compare this to my other snake's eyes, but she has really small eyes, and you can tell an all-white snake with small eyes, it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to be a lesser pied. Here's another really neat snake. This ball python is an albino pied. So basically it has, I think this one was half asleep. I think that's actually a male. And I've had him for a little over a year, I guess. And I actually bred him with a few of my snakes. And the hard part about a double recessive is if you breed this to a normal, all the babies come out looking normal. you get no visuals at all. And since it's a double recessive, I don't know if you can see her very good, but the cool thing I liked about it is he had like this really cool pattern right in the middle of his body, which is almost like a tattoo right in the middle, which is really neat, kind of unique. Some of them have more white than the last. Pieds are kind of unexpected. And I actually bred him to one of my albino het pied girls. So I might actually get more albino pieds this year. So this is just a straight pied, and he's a male. And he's actually one of my very first snakes. I bought him at the NARBC in Tinley Park. My very first year in ball pythons. I bought a male and a female, and probably what I should have done is bought all females and then waited on the male and got some multi-gene males. But he's still a really cool snake. I don't know, the prices really come down on these, and I think he would make a really cool pet. So if you look back at my my spider pied male, so when you breed spider to pied, it pushes all the color to the head of the snake, and then every now and then you get one that's completely white with no pattern at all on the head. And kind of the nickname for this combo with an all-white snake is what they call a white wedding. So when people are talking about a white wedding ball python, it's a spider pied with no pattern at all. And the other thing you want to watch is, so this is a female, and when she gets big enough to breed, one thing you don't want to do is mix my spider pied male to the spider pied female, because if you get like a super spider, it's actually a lethal mutation, and the embryo partially develops in the egg and then it dies. So you kind of want to avoid spider to spider. So this was actually one of the very first fire pieds that I've seen on the market, and still they're not very common. So basically it's a pied, it's a male, and the fire gene, basically what it does is it lightens up all of the pattern. It almost looks like kind of like a pastel pied a little bit, but it has the fire gene instead. And actually, if you breed just a fire to a fire, you get a super fire that's an all-white snake. So fire's a pretty cool gene, and it's a really neat enhancer and lightener, and it looks really well in some combos. Okay, so I pretty much moved through all of the 50-40 tubs here, and I'm going to move down to this boa tub. And actually I don't have any boas. And this one I'm sure you've seen. Her name's Lucy, if you looked at some of my other videos. And she is a really big snake. I can't even almost get her all on this camera. And she's a sweetheart. So this is actually a reticulated python. And reticulated pythons are the largest snakes in the world. And they can get up to be, just the regular reticulated pythons can get up to be like 300 pounds. It's pretty incredible. And this girl is actually partially dwarf, so she's 50% dwarf, so she won't get quite that big. I'm not sure exactly how big she'll get, and a lot of it depends on how much you feed her. So if you feed them a lot, they grow really big, and if you don't feed them a lot, then you can keep them fairly small. But I'm just hoping she doesn't outgrow this tub. And so she's actually has a mutation, and it's albino. So she's an albino, and there's different phases of albino. So this is actually in only reticulated pythons. They have white albino, lavender albino, and purple albino. And basically it's another gene that basically attaches to the albino gene. So you can't really have a lavender without an albino. It's kind of weird. And one copy of the gene is lavender, and 2 copies of the gene is purple. And she happens to have no copies of the gene, so they call her a white albino because she doesn't have the lavender or purple genes. Okay, so that pretty much finishes that rack. And we'll move over here to the ARS 7030 tubs, where I have some of my breeder females. So this ball python is just an albino. She's a female, and she, I believe, is really full of eggs. And I crossed her with my albino pied male, so all her babies should be het pied, which should be interesting. So you need to breed I'm hoping to hold back some of the het pieds, breed them back to the pied, and get some more albino pieds. Yeah. Breed them back to the albino pied male. Yeah. If you can follow that. So anyway, there's different phases, basically different amounts of contrast you see in albinos. And this one is actually what they call a high contrast. You can see the lines between the white and the yellow are really sharp. And I have another one where it's kind of faded between the lines between the yellow and the white. And so the other one is het pied though, so we'll actually get some albino pieds, and it'll be interesting to compare the low contrast albino pieds to the high contrast albino pieds. Okay, this girl is just a regular old normal. And I picked up a few normals just to kind of boost my projects along, so I have some more eggs. She actually looks like she's ovulating, so you can see right in the middle, right from this section here all the way down to this section here. She's kind of really swollen, like she swallowed a baseball. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but so what happens is you breed a ball python, and it mates several times over 5 or 6 months. And then, basically, the eggs aren't fertilized until it ovulates. And when it ovulates, it swells, and that's when the eggs are fertilized. And then when the swelling goes down, you basically get what you get. So if some of the eggs aren't fertilized, then they come out as slugs. And if they are fertilized, then you get nice pearly white eggs. So this is what a lesser looks like. One of my prettier lessers. She's a really beautiful snake, and we think she might be het for ghost. She's possible het ghost, and ghost is a recessive gene, and sometimes when you have ghosts in the mix, it'll actually lighten. I've seen it act almost like fire if you have just one copy of the ghost gene. But if you get 2 copies and a visual ghost, it really fades everything out. It gets really faded. So she's a possible het ghost. We think she is het ghost. And I actually tried to breed her with my bamboo, and I don't know at this point in the season, I don't think she's going to go. She could surprise me, but she just doesn't look like she has eggs in her. So this is just a pastel, and I think she has eggs in her. And I actually picked up this girl as part of a collection that some guy was getting out of ball pythons, and he had a bunch of females, and I picked her up. And figured I'd use her to kind of expand my operation here. So this is a pied female, just a regular pied, and I actually picked her up at the NARBC with my other pied male, and she's been eating really well. I think she's going to lay eggs this year. And I crossed her with my albino pied male, so for this cross I should get pieds het albino. So this was another, this was a normal female I picked up as part of that guy's collection. And I can't believe she was really, really big, and then she laid eggs, and then she got really small, incredibly small. And then, I don't know if you saw my feeding video last week, but she ate a really huge rat. And then I followed up with another one, and she actually ate two of them. And she's so big, she almost looks like she was ovulating, which is probably too much, but she's almost, I mean, after those two big rats, it looks like she has almost all her body condition back from after laying, which is pretty incredible. And for a normal, she's actually pretty dark, so it's just good to have normals around. I think I crossed her with my bamboo, so half of her eggs will actually be bamboos. So here's another one of my albino females. I actually paid a good price for her, got her off a morph market as an adult, and just picked her up last year. She's het pied, so I should get some albino pieds for her, and she looks definitely big enough to be full of eggs. She should lay here pretty soon. And if you compare it to my other albino, you can see she's, you know, she's got some weird patterns in her. It almost looks like, a pastel pied kind of. So she's got some dark yellow and some light yellow, but it kind of looks, especially like right in here. But to me, I'd consider this like a low contrast albino, because it's just not as sharp as my other albino. And it should be interesting to see what the babies look like on this one. So this is a pied female. I've had her for a couple of years, and I tried to pair her up this year, but I don't think she's going to go. She was a little too small to start breeding, and then as soon as I paired her up, like the day I paired her up, she stopped eating, and she didn't eat for like 8 months. And she didn't lose any weight, but at her body weight when I started breeding, she just wasn't big enough to be bred. So I basically stopped pairing everyone up now. We're just kind of in the middle of egg laying and baby hatching season, so I'm hoping she'll get enough body weight back for next season. The only problem with this girl is she decided that she does not like rats and eats mostly mice. So you need a lot of mice to really get a ball python in condition. And she eats mice pretty good. I'm hoping eventually to get those African soft furs to the point where I can start feeding her the African soft furs to maybe make her grow a little faster. So on this one, she is basically just a normal, and I got her for free on Craigslist. Some guy had her as a pet, and the problem was she was like a 1.5 years old, and they were feeding her like 1 mouse a month, and she was so small I couldn't believe it. She was like as big as a hatchling almost. And I started feeding her rats, and she'd pound like 2 or 3 back to back every week, and she grew like a rocket until she got up to body size, and then she grew faster than all my other snakes. And then I bred her this year, and she looks like she's going to go. So it's kind of a good feeling to find one like that and grow it up and get to this point. So this girl has the Pastel gene and the Pinstripe gene, and she laid eggs, and she is eating rats again. So yeah, this is actually one of the ones I bought in that package deal too. So I actually have 4 Pastel Pinstripes, females, that are breeding size. And this one actually happens to be one of the more yellow ones. If you notice, like towards her belly, she has a lot of yellow. The other ones don't quite have that much yellow on their belly. Here's another pastel. She laid eggs and she's back on feed. Okay, here's another one of my pastel pinstripes. And you can see on this one, it's definitely not as yellow along the belly as my other one. And she's trying to get out. Come back, come back. And she's definitely going to lay eggs this year. Alright, so we went through the 70-30 rack. And the next one is this boa tub with Lucy. No, this is actually Sunny in here. So Sunny is actually, I bought him as the mate for Lucy. And he's a little bit different. He's a reticulated python. But he actually has some super dwarf in him. So there's super dwarf, dwarf, and mainland. The mainland reticulated pythons get like 300 pounds. The dwarfs get about half that or less. And if you get pure super dwarf, they're really, really small, almost like a king snake, small. So I kind of wanted some in the middle, some that were big snakes, but not big enough for one person to handle. And that's kind of why I got into this dwarf and super dwarf mixes here. And he's about as old as Lucy, but with the super dwarf, he's definitely smaller. You can see he definitely doesn't have the body mass of Lucy. And he was really super aggressive when he was young, and I was almost afraid to even touch him when he was smaller. And he's a little better now, but I always have to be kind of weary around him. That he's always really kind of skittish and flighty, and he hasn't snapped at me in a long time, which is good. And he actually has 2 copies of the lavender gene, so he's actually a purple albino, super dwarf, mainland, reticulated python. It says dwarf, super dwarf, and mainland blood, all in him. He's actually het anery too, which is aneurystic. So he's got some pretty complicated genetics, but he's a pretty cool snake. This year I crossed him with Lucy, and Lucy didn't go. I'm hoping next year they'll actually lay some eggs. So check out this beast of a ball python. I actually went on Morph Market looking at the old females, and I wanted to buy the biggest females I could. And this is actually a het caramel albino, so she's normal, but one of the parents was caramel albino, so she carries the caramel albino gene. And I don't have any caramel albinos to cross her to, so the babies will be like 50% het caramel albino. It gets a little complicated and diluted from there. But a big snake like this, she started the season at like, close to 4,000 grams, I think. And now that she's full of eggs, she's even bigger. So a big snake like this can lay, I've seen him lay up to like 15 eggs, which is pretty impressive. She's by far my biggest ball python. So this girl, she's just a straight pinstripe. And I remember when pinstripes first came out, you see videos of them, and they were selling for like $25,000 a piece. It was ridiculous. And now they're, you can get a pinstripe baby for like $80 or something. But she was another one in the package deal that I thought would be kind of a neat gene to have, just a straight pinstripe. And she's definitely full of eggs. She's probably going to be the next one to lay. You can almost see by the shape of her tail, she could push one out tomorrow. So this is my lesser female. If you watch my last video, you can see her when she was really huge and she was actually laying eggs. So she just laid eggs the other day. She might be a little grumpy, but I kind of wanted to show you on this one. She hasn't eaten anything since she laid eggs. And when they go into the breeding season, they stop eating for months and months. She probably hasn't eaten for like 6 months. So when you see me feeding the big rats, it's like one of the first meals they've had in about 6 months. And she's definitely kind of still in that egg mode where she wants to protect her eggs. And you can tell she's kind of jumping when I touch her and twitching her head a little bit. So she's a little bit grumpy, but I kind of wanted to pick her up and kind of show you just how skinny they are after they lay eggs. I mean, I don't know if you can really see it on the camera, but compared to what she was, it's just incredible. I mean, her whole body cavity just kind of sinks in, and they look super skinny right after they lay eggs. But I mean, you feed them a few big rats, and they gain it back really fast. So this is just a plain lesser, and if you compare it with my other lesser that's het ghost, we think it's het ghost, you can see she's not quite as bright, but still a really pretty lesser. So when I bought that big, huge caramel albino, het caramel albino, I actually bought 2 snakes at once, and this was the other one. And believe it or not, she's het caramel albino too, and I got them both for really cheap, almost nothing. And the good thing about these guys is they'll lay a lot of eggs, so I mean, if you can breed a really nice male to them, she almost is looking like she's gonna lay eggs right here. The way she's moving her body around. Sometimes when they put their tail in the middle, you know what? I think she is gonna lay, which is I might have to come back in 5 minutes and see if there's eggs in here. But sure enough, I think she's going to lay some eggs. And a big girl like that, she might lay, well, I don't know. She might lay up to 10 eggs. I think the other one's quite a bit bigger. So here's another pastel pinstripe. She's getting ready to lay too. She's been off food for a long time, so she looks nice and fat and plump, but I'm pretty sure that's just eggs in there. She looks like she's sleeping. One more pastel pinstripe, and this one actually laid quite a few eggs. That was a 10-egg clutch. So she's back on feed too. So this is my jungle Wilma spider female, and she laid eggs this year. She kind of had some complications, so she actually laid 7 eggs, and she got egg bound on 3 of them. So what happened was when she was pushing her eggs out, normally they'll have eggs kind of right at the end of their tail, all in a row. And she had kind of like an egg here and an egg here, and kind of randomly through her body. And she didn't actually lay those last 3 eggs until the following day. And then when I incubated them, they molded, and then during incubation another one went bad. So actually we only had 3 good babies from this one. But this is pretty cool. She's got the spider gene and the jungle Wilma gene. So the spider gene just kind of reduces the breaks up the pattern into like a spider pattern, and then the jungle Wilma reduces it even more, and you'll get more of a, they call it a ridgeback. It's kind of the nickname for a jungle Wilma spider is ridgeback. But she is just really, really a cool snake. I keep zooming in too much and it blurs, but she's really neat. I think she's one of my most impressive, I mean, it's nothing real fancy. Actually, the jungle Wilma is not really being used a lot. Most people don't even know what jungle Wilma is, I think. So, I'm pretty excited to be working with that gene. Okay, so this is my last snake, and it's a Pastel Calico female. And it's a pretty cool mutation. The Calico just kind of breaks up the pattern on the sides, and Pastel gives it a little bit of yellow color. And she just laid eggs. So she's actually going into shed. You can see the little bit of gray in her eyes. Alright, so that was my snakes. And one more thing I want to check on is my dog Amani to see if she's had puppies. Let's check that out. Alright guys, I'm here in my with my dog Amani in my air-conditioned, climate-controlled, heat and AC doghouse, and she has not had the babies yet. And she is ready. Look at her. She's so fat underneath there. She's ready for babies. There's one more thing I'm going to do for an upgrade on this calf hut. So I noticed that these carpets are just kind of all over the place. And one of the things I'm worried about is if she has puppies that they're going to get stuck between this carpet or underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten it all out, and then I'm going to use these drywall screws and fasten it to this plastic floor down here. And that should hold it in place. Should be a little bit safer. So for my snakes, I actually told you that was all my snakes, but I actually have more snakes, and I have some eggs in the incubator and some eggs hatching that just hatched this week, and I should have up to 100 more hatchlings this year, so stay tuned for another episode on my hatchlings. So I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Alright, I have the carpet all screwed down. You know what I'm starting to think? I think we need maybe a couch and a TV in here.